Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, there were men that were dancing, creeping, and crooked, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? What's a tantalus? Or a gasogene? And what's the difference between a hansom cab and a four-wheeler?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Bert Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 503. Solving the Problems of the Red-Headed League. Well, hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we get into the minutiae of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And Bert, are you ready to solve all of our problems together today?
Yes, of course. I mean, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, take 12, take 15.
Oh,
but
perfect.
Let's solve all those problems.
No
let's
rush.
do it.
I like it. I like it. Well, this, yes, is Trifles, where we take a look at some deeper issues, and it is the third week of the month, which means it is part of our series, Mr. Sherlock Holmes the Theorist. We take a piece of Sherlockian scholarship and make it available to you and discuss it a little bit and give you a feel for what happens in the world of Sherlockians. And, oh, maybe we encourage you to go write your own piece. Or, even better, maybe we encourage you to pick up the publication where some of these pieces come from. All good. And we'll have links in the show notes to how you can do that, obviously. But we also want to remind you that we do appreciate your support for as little as, or even less than $1 a month. If you subscribe annually, you can support the show. You can feel good about your contribution to the world of Sherlock Holmes, knowing that you let this kind of zaniness happen on a regular basis. It's crazy, I know. Well, you can do that on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/trifles or on Substack at trifles.substack.com. Either way, we'll have the links in the show notes to you, but you can choose what level of support you'd like to have and what frequency, whether it's monthly or annually. And we do allow you to listen to the show ad-free on those platforms if you support us financially. And as a thank you, we have a drawing at the end of every month where you automatically get entered to win a free back issue of the Baker Street Journal. So check that out and see what works for you. Okay, well, we find ourselves in the winter 2025 Baker Street Journal. That's volume 75, number 4. It was the last issue published last year. If you'd like to subscribe to the Baker Street Journal, just get yourselves to bakerstreetirregulars.com and check out the BSJ section there. You'll find some samples. You'll find previous issues available and the ability to sign up for a subscription. So you can check Greg's article out there. And it is Solving the Problems of the Red-Headed League by our friend Greg Derrick.
Indeed.
Oh.
Greg is an old friend of ours, but that doesn't really color why the paper is here because it's just a terrific paper. Greg was invested into the Irregulars as the engineer's thumb. He's a co-leader of the Men on the Tour, a member of the Three Garridebs, the Speckled Band, the Cornish Horrors, and the Adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes. And this is a lovely paper solving the problems of the Red-Headed League, because what this does is it collects and brings together a lot of conversation about this story. And this story is very close to my heart because our New Jersey-based group, the Red-Headed League of Jersey, is going to be celebrating its 50th anniversary in October.
Oh.
And this, is a lovely roundup of the Red-Headed League. And Greg kicks it off by saying, this is unfortunate. It's a favorite story of so many readers, but there are some, big flaws, things that might make you doubt that it ever could have happened. and then he gives you a quick rundown of them. First of all, Jabez Wilson says the ad telling him about the Red-Headed League was in the Morning Chronicle of April 27, 1890, quote, just 2 months ago. Well, 2 months from April is June, and yet the notice saying that the League was dissolved is dated October 9, 1890. October 9. Well, Dorothy Sayers tried to resolve this by coming up with the idea that the date of August 4th in Watson's manuscript was just misread as April 27th. But that's not really very likely. And then the day on which the adventure took place was a Saturday. Holmes says that. Mr. Merriweather says that. October 9, 1890 was a Thursday. And then there's the question, why did John Clay give notice to Jabez Wilson before the robbery? The tunnel was finished, yeah, but it gave Wilson the opportunity to call on Sherlock Holmes. What couldn't have been the £4 he was getting for working for Jabez Wilson? The closing of the League before the robbery only, saved £4, but it caused the entire failure of their scheme. So why didn't they do that in advance of the crime? And then there are 3 or 4 more big issues here that Greg puts on the table.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want me to enumerate all of them or just jump to the solutions, but we may as well lay them out.
Just quickly. Yeah.
What did Clay and his accomplice do with all the dirt that they had dug out in this tunnel? I mean, it had to go somewhere, and they couldn't just carry it out of the pawn shop without anyone noticing. Yeah. I mean, even if it was a slow business day, Wilson himself would have been there. So there must have been an extremely large cellar there. But, that's a lot of dirt. And then also 30,000 Napoleons, gold Napoleons, in 15 crates. That would have taken up a lot of space and also weighed a great deal and not have been easy to transport. How were the thieves planning to carry that through the tunnel and upstairs after they dug? And as with the dirt, how are they going to get the 15 crates out of the pawn shop without anyone noticing? As G.B. Newton noted, loading the crates onto a cart outside the pawnbroker shop on a Sunday morning might well provoke some awkward questions. And finally, the problem that Greg Derrick identifies here is when captured, John Clay calls to his friend in the tunnel to tell him to run for it. Jump! Archie, shouldn't the 4th smartest man in London have realized that if the authorities are aware of his plot and are waiting for him at one end of his tunnel, they must have people waiting at the other end, too? And Greg says, fortunately, there are reasonable explanations for all of these problems, and no one needs to have any doubts about the truthfulness of Watson's narrative.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and his explanations here really are pretty clever. So first of all, why did the League close before the robbery took place? Well, Greg suggests that it's because of the ego of John Clay. And we know this because as he's arrested, he says, "I beg that you will not touch me with your filthy hands. You may not be aware that I have royal blood in my veins. Have the goodness also, when you address me always, to say sir and please." So clearly here's somebody who had a very large ego, and he spent a very long time working with Jabez Wilson. which must have really
He was not
been
the brightest bulb, right?
really been a drag. And so that gets to the second thing. And Greg is really pretty clever about this. So he couldn't wait. The answer then is clearly Clay couldn't wait to get out from under Jabez Wilson. But just to make sure nobody would take it all seriously, what would happen, thought Clay, suggests Greg, if Wilson took the sign announcing the League's dissolution to show as proof of his story? But suppose it was a day in June of 1890, and the sign said the League was dissolved on October 9, 1890, a date still 4 months in the future. Aha! Well, if the sign had the current day's date on it, it would have been connected with something that was really happening on the current date. But with an obviously false date, anybody seeing it, like, a policeman, would be sure the whole thing was obviously nonsense, especially when combined with the rest of the story about a league of red-headed men and being paid to copy the Encyclopedia Britannica. Wilson would have seemed like a lunatic, nothing anybody could take seriously. So, and is there any further evidence, he asks, that the date was false? Yes. If the adventure really took place on October 9, the day would have been Thursday, and we know it was a Saturday. And, as Holmes noted, the thieves wanted to take the gold on the weekend, so they would have more time to escape before the crime was discovered. So, Clay thought the false date was an added form of insurance to keep anyone from taking Wilson seriously. He could not have imagined that Wilson would have had the brains or luck to see the one man in London who would go beyond the laughter and take the matter seriously enough to look into it.
I like that. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
That's reasonable. And that explains the early closing of the League and the dates, but it still leaves the conundrums, or is that conundra, of the transportation, the dirt, and the gold. And Greg says the solutions to all of these revolve around the same possibility. And it requires saying that Watson deliberately left something out of his narrative, which is the kind of solution to a Sherlockian problem that I'm usually against. In this case, though, I think there's a valid reason for Watson leaving something out. At a time, let's recall, it was shocking for a woman to show her ankles. The Victorian editor of the respectable Strand magazine probably wouldn't want its readers to be offended by someone writing about sewers. And Greg says my knowledge of sewers is not large, mainly coming from the movie The Third Man and Les Miserables. Most people who think of sewers, if they do think of them at all, that is, probably picture them as a system of pipes taking things from one place to another. But there are sewers in large cities like Vienna and London and Paris. It's a system of underground tunnels that go throughout the city, and there's plenty of space to travel through them. And so John Clay's plan was for him and his accomplice to dig a tunnel from Jabez Wilson's cellar to the sewer. And then they'd dig a tunnel from the sewer to the bank. So for the first tunnel, the dirt would be piled up in Wilson's cellar or occasionally carried out in not too large amounts. And there wouldn't be a great deal of dirt, as that tunnel would be narrow and just wide enough for the criminals to go through. And there'd be no plans to bring the gold back up through it. After the sewer was reached, the piled up dirt from the first tunnel and all the dirt from the second tunnel could be just dumped into the sewers with the rest of the effluvia. But the second tunnel would take more time. That would have to be wide enough to bring the gold down and could have included some apparatus for lowering it down through the tunnel. And both entries, of course, would have to be camouflaged each time they were worked. Right? So there'd be sewer workers traveling through and watching for valuables that people had accidentally dropped into the system. That means that there'd have to be much more care taken. in the case of digging from one single tunnel from Wilson's shop to the bank. But it was a lot less digging, and it solves the problem of the removal of the dirt and the gold.
Yeah, very clever. And imagining that there's this second tunnel and the sewer involved, really helps. Because then on the night of the robbery, all Clay would have to do is set up some very official-looking signs and barriers saying that this section of the sewers was closed for repairs or something like that to keep people out. And you get some forged official-looking papers to keep out patrols, and then you lower the gold from the bank vault onto a cart, and out it goes to the nearest exit, which would also have been blocked off by some official paperwork and signage. And so that just solves everything, the disposal of the dirt, transport of the gold, how you take it away. But also, says Greg, it solves one other final problem. Because if you remember, once Clay is captured, he calls out to his accomplice Archie to jump for it. Now, if Clay found people at this end of his tunnel waiting for him, he would realize there's no place for Archie to jump back to Jabez Wilson's house. But if there was a second tunnel, that would have been a great exit for Archie, his accomplice taking off, into a maze of sewers and underground and tunnels.
Yeah, and this is ripped from the headlines too. Greg said he remembered an earlier version of this paper at a meeting of the Three Garridebs. A member, Warren Randall, God bless Warren, told me that there was a case in the 1830s where a sewer worker doing repairs found a drain which led him to the vaults of the Bank of England. The hearing or reading of this event might even have been the inspiration of Clay's whole plot. And it's probably essential that we pause here and make sure that people have listened to the previous episode on the Thames Police. There's no indication whether they had a sewer division or not, but after reading this, they should at least have had a single galley down there.
Yeah, pretty good. And then we get to the question of the dates. So the adventure is, as Greg has said, took place in June, and the date of October was deliberately false. However, the story, when you begin to read the case, Watson says, I'd called upon my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, one day in the autumn of last year. Now, Greg believes the original manuscript, which, by the way, we do not have, which doesn't exist, or at least it's not within our access. I don't know that it's been ever seen. The original manuscript could have read in the summer of last year, rather than autumn. And it could be that the proofreader at the Strand, remembering the October date, which is more prominent in the story than the earlier mention of April, could be the proofreader just wanted to correct a mistake and make it autumn. And, we're all aware there are a number of internal errors in the later stories that one would think should have been caught by a proofreader. Isn't it possible that upon publication of The Red-Headed League, only the second canonical story, after all, published in the Strand, the beginning author or his literary agent saw the change to autumn and reacted so strongly that the editors made a decision never again to correct anything in later stories, no matter how seemingly wrong it was? And that the doctor or literary agent, realizing how much his angry overreaction had hurt the proofreader, or perhaps cost him his job, vowed never to complain that way again?
Yeah, a typesetter accidentally sets the name James instead of John. Well, maybe it was his son James's birthday. And the proofreader sees it and says to himself, wait, isn't the doctor's name John? But then he remembers the autumn incident and says to himself, no, I'm not changing anything of this author's ever again. And the doctor sees the same mistake. He says to himself, well, that's wrong. I remember that poor proofreader last time. No, I won't say anything. I'll leave it as it is. The proof or disproof of this theory must await the discovery of the original manuscripts of the Red-Headed League and or the Man with the Twisted Lip. But it could explain a number of the mysteries of Sherlock Holmes. Oh, what great fun.
Isn't that delightful? That, that wrap up and putting all these things on the table. It's really nice. Nicely done.
Oh, well done. Well, if you'd like to partake in scholarship like this, you can pick it up at the Baker Street Journal every quarter. Just subscribe for the whole year. And not only do you get the 4 quarterly issues, you get a Christmas annual thrown in as well. That's 5 for the price of 4. How do you like that?
And take your own squint at the cases of Sherlock Holmes and find something that you say, hey, wait a minute, that can't be right. And, put some words down on paper and have some fun with this.
And it'll just be a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
Now, I begin to think that my reputation, such as it is, will suffer shipwreck if I'm so candid. Omne ignotum pro magnifico.
Everything becomes commonplace by explanation.
Watson, that is a very loose translation. Oh, please,